Alrighty then. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Matthew Baker of Beautiful New York Tours. A good friend of mine who lives in Harlem asked me to do a piece about the Queen of Soul Food. Now, if you know Harlem restaurant culture, you already know who I mean. If you don't, then let me have the honor of introducing you to Sylvia Woods. Sylvia Woods is arguably Harlem's greatest embodiment of the American dream. She grew up in a one-horse town in South Carolina with nothing. Worked in a family picking string beans. And came to New York with her newlywed husband. They were 18 and 19 years old. And she started working in a luncheonette called Johnson's Luncheonette. She was a waitress there, and she worked there for 8 years. At the end of 8 years, she bought the place and renamed it after herself, Sylvias. This was 1962. Harlem was a very different neighborhood in those days than it is today. I had the honor of meeting Miss Sylvia a year or two before she passed away. And we talked about this a little bit. I said, 1962 is not exactly the time I would want to come to Harlem. And she gave me a wink and a smile and said, I weathered the storm. And indeed she did. Now, what do I mean when we talk about weathering the storm? Well, lots of neighborhoods, not just in New York, but in any major city, have their ups and downs, socioeconomically, politically, in terms of drugs, in terms of crime, in terms of unemployment, and they find their way back. Harlem is well on its way back. In the 1960s, it was the bad old days of Harlem. Sylvia had to make sure that the drug pushers on the corner wouldn't harass her customers. How did she do this? She opened an hour earlier than other restaurants in the area and fed the drug pushers. During the riots of the late 60s, nobody torched Sylvia's. Collard greens in exchange for protection? Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Speaking of collard greens, we should talk about the food at Sylvia's. It is the great soul food restaurant of the city. Her South Carolina background serves her well in this regard. Fried chicken, blackened catfish, sassy rice, peach cobbler, banana pudding, and my favorite, the fried pork chops. I like them better than the smothered pork chops, but if you don't know which one to try, bear in mind you get 2 chops in an order. So if you order at Sylvia's, ask for 1 and 1. They'll take care of you. Now, when Sylvia first named the place after herself, it was a little one-room lunch counter. Today, the Woods family owns half the block. It has really expanded into the grandest of culinary empires. I have spent most of my time at the corner of Sylvia's in a room that's called Sylvia's Also. Why do I spend so much time there? Because when I'm there, it's usually with a great big tour group of 3 or 4 busloads of people, and that's where they have the space for that kind of group. But they have other elegant lunchrooms as well, where politicians have planned meetings and big galas. They have had parties for entertainers, various musicians, actors, you name it. And everyone in Harlem goes to Sylvia's. There are those who would say that it's a shadow of its former self. I don't know. I came to New York in 1992. All I can say is that if it's a shadow of its former self, then its former self must have been liquid gold, because I think what Sylvia's is now is pretty great. Now, today, those who can't get to Harlem can still get a taste of Sylvia's because late in her life she started a line of bottled sauces and boxed mixes and things like that, and there are a lot of grocery stores that carry them, and of course there's always mail order. But there is no experience quite like sitting at the lunch counter where it all started in 1962. Shortly after she passed away, Sylvia's was posthumously given an honor by the city for 50 years of service in Harlem. She's right around the corner from the Apollo Theater, and no visit to Harlem is really complete without a visit to Sylvia's. One colleague of mine who does Harlem gospel tours at the churches always used to drop off her clients at the church service and then go have breakfast at Sylvia's. She and the other tour guides in the company would do this, and when the boss objected, saying, "You're supposed to stay with the people at the church," they mutinied and kept having breakfast at Sylvia's. Eventually, the boss gave up the fight and joined them for breakfast. So, if you would like to have a great meal at Sylvia's, I highly recommend it, and if it's a part of a tour that we do together, so much the better. Once it's safe to do so, please check me out at Beautiful New York Tours. You can search Beautiful New York Tours on Facebook or email me at baker.tours@yahoo.com. Again, that is baker.tours@yahoo. Thank you very much.